So I work with an organization called Creative Center for Community Mobilization, where we support the design and implementation of programs for about 15 years. So today's session explores a question that is increasingly important across Africa, and that is how can education systems better recognize and work with communities to improve foundational learning, education during prolonged crisis, and what this means for financing, for recognition, as well as system rebuilding. So I invite you, ladies and gentlemen, as you're enjoying your cup of tea, not only to listen to the differences between these contexts, but also to understand the common principles that can guide education systems across Africa. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce to you the team from Malawi that will give us their presentation. And they'll be answering a question: how can existing community structures become stronger partners in improving teaching and learning? So let me introduce to you our Deputy Director of Quality Assurance and Standards in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Madam Joy Saukira, who brings extensive experience in strengthening education quality as well as learner outcomes. A big hand for Mai Saukira as she's coming forward. And we're also going to have Madam Mphatso Mary Magombo Banda from the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Affairs, whose work has strengthened community ownership and participation in child development as well as education development in different contexts in our country. A big hand for her, she's coming forward. And lastly, we are going to have Mr. Neftali Benister, a program manager from CRECCOM, an education system specialist working on strengthening links between communities, schools, as well as the education system. A big hand for him as well. So let's enjoy their presentation.
Good afternoon. I'll bring you a case of Malawi. Across Malawi, community participation has become a defining feature of educational reform. Most of the structures are present in almost every school. These structures are the mother groups, parent-teacher association, and also we have other structures such as the school management committee. They are available in almost every school. And they participate actively in contributing to infrastructure development, governance of schools, and even ensuring that there's attendance, there's no absenteeism in schools. However, despite their contributions, there are also limited mechanisms that connect the community action directly to teaching and learning. For example, parents rarely interact with teachers to understand what happens in the learning environment. And also parents rarely make meaningful information from their children in terms of what they have learned in school and the like. This may be rarely because of illiteracy levels, family labor, maybe they're busy in their farms, and also maybe a parent is just not interested in school issues. As a result now, we want to know how can we ensure that the system can capacitate the structures to ensure that they are also in line with whatever happens in the classroom. So the question that is here is, how can the education system enhance community capacity to ensure that they also take action to better teaching and learning environment? So different models have been tested in Malawi, which are also to be presented here. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon all. Indeed, to continue from where Madam Pats was stopped, we are looking at the innovation that could answer the question she posed. So rather than creating another committee or new committees or community structures, we have a pilot that is taking place that is looking at the redesigning of the connections between the structures that are already existing. So in this pilot, the approach is known as the community to classroom accountability and support. And in this innovation, it's based on one simple principle where we are saying communities possess some knowledge and also social capital, which when meaningfully utilized can contribute to improved teaching and learning. So in this innovation, the first element of this model is that there is a community education change agent. And this agent, the purpose is to bridge the gap or bridge between the households, schools, and the local government structures to ensure that information moves in both directions. And the second element is the use of what is called data labs. And these are not physical laboratories, but a structural dialogue where parents, community, representatives, teachers, schools, leaders, and local support officers come together to examine simple learner performance data. And in this element or a part of the model, these people come together and ask questions such as which learners are struggling? Why are they struggling? What are the barriers that are existing at homes? What support is needed in school? And who is responsible for taking such action? So these conversations transform data from something collected for reporting into something used for improving learning. So the purpose is not to judge or shame the teachers, but to create a shared responsibility for children's learning. So in this, school leaders then translate these agreed priorities into instructional action. Structures like the teacher development centers, where we have the primary education advisors and the quality assurance officers, respond through coaching and mentoring of teachers, and also the districts, district education officers and community development structures provide ongoing coaching, support, and also the follow-up. In this way, accountability becomes continuous rather than occasional, and it becomes focused not simply on whether children attend school, but on whether they are learning when they get into those schools. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so I think having implemented this over a period of time, there are key lessons, there are key observations that we've made. Hello. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me now. So I was saying, I think having done this kind of approach for quite a while, a lot of key lessons, a lot of observations that we've learned across the world, and perhaps before I delve into that one, take us to the clip, at least so that we can watch that short clip that demonstrates the benefits of engaging with the schools from the perspective of the communities. The volume, please.
And challenges and act on evidence. Meet Naomi Musa. Her academic progress depends on what happens in the classroom, at home, and within the wider community. Families are encouraging attendance, supporting learning routines, and engaging with their children's progress.
When she comes back from school, I check the work she has done and help her where she has not performed well because I know she cannot get everything right. I also make time to meet with her teachers so that I can understand how she is performing at school.
Community change agents, including parents, local leaders, real fathers, mother groups, and other community members, are no longer just recipients of educational services, but help identify barriers to learning, support vulnerable learners, and connect families with schools.
We were taught several key themes, and one of these themes is education of our children. Now we train other fathers on these themes, such that every week we visit one another to see how we are supporting our children in their education.
Community voices are brought together with learner assessment information, attendance records, and teacher observations through community school learning labs. Here, schools and communities jointly identify teaching challenges and agree on practical actions.
As community, they are taking part in following these learners. We do talk to them, their roles on their kids.
The information generated at community and school level guides professional support. Teacher development centers, primary education advisors, and district education teams provide coaching, mentoring, and follow-up that respond to real classroom needs.
The community school learning lab gives us reliable evidence from the schools and communities, allowing us to make informed decisions to improve foundational learning.
Learning improves because accountability does not stop at the school gate. Communities identify challenges. Schools respond. Teachers receive targeted support. District teams coordinate action. Families reinforce learning at home. Together, Malawi is showing that communities are not outside the education system. They are part of it.
Thank you so much. So I think from the documentary, there are basically about 4 or more lessons that we can derive, which are key to improving the role of the community towards enhancing learning gains of their children. Number one is that the systems don't necessarily need to create new structures. There are already so many such structures. There are school committees, there are PTAs, there are mother groups there are even real fathers out there who, when capacitated, or what they need is to have the agency, the motivation, and the capacity to be able to make sense of the data that they receive from the school, to have the capacity to support their child, but also to have the capacity to engage into meaningful discussion with the teachers at the school. Number two is that the community accountability becomes more meaningful when there are clear pathways as to how the communities and the schools connect with each other and make sense of the data regarding learning. Thirdly, accountability should always be accompanied by support. So communities on one hand need support for them to have that momentum, for them to have that agency, for them to believe in themselves that they can contribute to the learning of their child. But on the other hand, even the teachers too need capacity to be able to make meaningful use of the knowledge that communities do have. Parents have knowledge about their child. They know how their child learns, they know how their child behaves, they know how what their child loves. And so if you make meaningful use of this information, then the child is would stand to benefit a lot. And finally, we've learned that sustainable improvement happens when communities become more committed to becoming part of the education system. And so we believe this is how community participation evolves into a system accountability where they coordinate with the school environment and be able to talk about issues that matter in as far as their child's learning is concerned. That's our story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So that's the story from Malawi, and you have seen that the experience that they have shared shows that communities are already doing something. But what we need to tighten is that there is need for us to strengthen the accountability loops, where now their voices, they inform the decisions that now improve the learning outcomes of our learners. Because at the end of the day, all we're looking at is reducing or ending the learning poverty that is there in Africa. So thank you very much, the Malawi team, for your story. At this point in time, let me ask Madam Adedoyin Adesina. Thank you so much. You can go have a seat. Adedoyin Adesina. So she's a seasoned research leader with over 15 years of experience generating evidence that shapes education, health, and nutrition policy. So her work demonstrates how rigorous research can directly influence programs that improve learning outcomes in challenging contexts. So she will tell us more about their story.
Thank you very much, Lennis. So, thank you. Thank you very much. So, for the Nigerian story, I'm going to start by giving us a bit of background. The out-of-school children in Nigeria before, that was around 2014, it was estimated to be 24%. Then there was crisis. And many communities were overrun, they left their communities, and after the crisis, they came back and started picking their lives again, and out-of-school children at that point in time was estimated to be 40%. Now, our team, working on a research, went to a local government in Adamawa State we're working on education research in conflict and crisis setting, and we did outsource survey. The outcome of the outsource survey surprisingly shows that out of school in these communities was just 7.5%, which was lower than what is recorded in the northeastern Nigeria, 40%. Then the question is, what is going on in these communities? This made our team to go back to carry out further research, and we got to know that the community came up with means of ensuring that they came up with means of ensuring that all their children are able to go to school. Please, can you go to the next slide, please? Yes, please. So they came up with this means to ensure that their children can go to school. So the question we were now asking is, if community can ensure that children can enroll and have access to school, why are these initiatives from the communities, why are they not being used? Why are they not being scaled up by the system? But then we got to notice that and got to know that the system do not listen to the communities. They don't listen to them. And so everyone is doing their own thing, the community, and then of course the system doing different things. This made our team to engage the system. Please, second slide, please. So we brought together the system and first and foremost, starting with engaging the system, that's the state government and a local government. Selecting a local government where out-of-school children was very high in Adamawa State. And the first thing we did was to present the result of the first study we did where out-of-school was very low and what the community did. So, and then asking the system what they would like to do based on these findings. And of course, well, fortunately for us, Adamawa State government at the state level, they agreed to test initiative and see if all communities have initiative that can be implemented within the context of education system. So that made us to start the innovation, the initiative, community system initiative, which has led to several children going back to school. Of course, that negotiation, the community, the system, and met with the communities to ask several questions about what the things they think could be done. And 3 initiatives were identified. One of the initiatives was targeted at poverty. The second one was targeted at flexible entry and re-entry. I'm not going to give details of each of these initiatives because of our time. And then, of course, the third one, which was about empowering. And this made us to conclude. Please go to the next slide. This made us to come to this conclusion that both community and the system, they both have concerns. And their main concern is that all children should go to school. But then, the concern of the system, which is high out of school, large children are out of school, and the concern of the community or the parents, which is poverty. We don't have money to send our children to school. We don't even know where the next food is coming from, are usually considered as 2 different issues. Instead of instead of the same issue that leads to another. So out of school children leads to poverty, and of course poverty leads to out of school. So they are one and the same. And the conclusion is this, that if the community is given a voice, if the local people are given a voice listened to by the system, ensuring that they come up with their own innovations and initiative, then these local innovations will become a resource that can actually help us to reduce out-of-school children, increase access to school, increase quality of education, and ensure that there is continuity of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So you can see that with the presentation from Malawi, there are those similarities where we are learning from Nigeria that the communities, they have the solutions. They know the issues, they know the problems that are there that are affecting foundational learning. However, we have to look at the system. How is it creating mechanisms to recognize the solutions, to listen to what the community is saying, and even to integrate these solutions into the entire education system for us to make inroads in improving foundational learning. And as we are proceeding, I will introduce to you our final contribution that takes us now into some of Africa's most fragile contexts, where communities have often become central actors sustaining education continuity, particularly in times and seasons where children cannot find themselves within school premises. So please welcome Madam Selamawit Alemayu, an education system expert who has led programs across more than 20 African countries. And she brings a wealth of experience in strengthening education systems and ensuring that evidence informs policy and practice, even in the most complex humanitarian settings. And let me also introduce Dr. Rebecca Glade, a distinguished researcher whose work explores the intersection of politics, history, and education in Sudan. Her insight into community-led education on resilient times of crisis. And we're also pleased to welcome Mamadou Salif Traore, an education specialist with extensive experience supporting quality education across fragile and conflict-affected contexts in Africa. His work bridges humanitarian response and long-term system strengthening with communities at the heart of sustainable change. So their research examines how communities finance, organize, and sustain education when formal systems face severe disruptions, and what this means for policy, financing, as well as system rebuilding. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a round of applause as they give us their story.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. Our piece today is going to be focusing on two different research reports that we had under the Education Research in Conflict and Protracted Crisis program that is being run by the International Rescue Committee and consortium of academic partners that we work with. And under the program, there is the ERIC Help Desk, where these two reports were generated. ERIC Help Desk is a global technical assistance roster providing support on evidence that's available in EIE context, education and emergency context, so as to enable better decision-making in policy and program on what works. In this case, the Help Desk was asked to look at a challenge that keeps coming up across crisis-affected education systems. What we continue seeing is that communities are not just passive beneficiaries, which we've seen in the previous presentations, but they are already sustaining education continuity in some of the world's most fragile contexts. So today, two interlinked studies were commissioned to explore what this looks like in practice. The first one will look at 5 Sahel countries, Mauritania, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali from the Sahel region, which traced how much of education financing is actually coming from households versus government versus donors. The second one goes deeper into the Sudan, specifically documenting how community-led initiatives like Kalami and informal education programs have stepped in to manage education where formal systems have broken down. So I will introduce you to my colleagues, Dr. Rebecca Glade and Mamadou Traore. I also encourage you to look at the full reports. We're going to provide the QR code so that we can also leave some time for discussion after the presentations. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Salamwat. Today we're talking about two different reports, and they're rather distinct. Before I go into the question of Sudan, I do want to highlight quickly some key themes that come across both of these reports. One is the massive challenges to education systems that are faced due to protracted emergencies and conflicts across the Sahel and in Sudan, where 90% of children in the Sahel are experiencing learning poverty, and in Sudan, where roughly half of all children, 8 million, have missed almost 500 days of learning since 2023. Another key theme then is the leadership of communities in the face of these challenges. In the Sahel, even with baseline government funding happening, families have taken on the bulk and large portions of the cost of education for their children. And in Sudan, in the face of education system collapse, communities have mobilized and created their own schools and systems, as well as reviving government schools in the absence of teacher salaries. So moving into the Sudan case, the challenges have been extreme. Since the outbreak of war in 2023, education systems in large portions of the country stopped entirely for over a year or 2 years. And communities responded to this by mobilizing and finding ways to create schools and education systems. This include Malawi, or religious schools, and community schools, as well as reviving government schools. And in the process, they've been able to meet some of the needs of their communities. Now, this is not easy, and it faces some real challenges in regards to the politically polarized environment in which accreditation and education services have functioned as weapons for all of the armed parties involved, placing civilians in the center in challenging ways. But communities have mobilized using trust, and in the process have demonstrated leadership that will be really essential going forward. Communities should be supported. Donors and organizations should support these structures materially in a way that recognizes the role of trust and builds on that trust in order to these systems reach. At the same time, we should recognize that the state is essential. This is a bridge. This is not a replacement to the state when it comes to education. With this, I will pass on to my colleague, Mama Freire.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Nice having me here. I will continue the discussion particularly on how in crisis-affected contexts, particularly focusing on Sahel regions, including 5 countries, as Salamurti mentioned,
resource mobilization, just because of the following points. I feel if it goes beyond resource mobilization, community participation would empower the members of the community, and it also give them ownership of the learning of their learners. It will not just be sending the learners to schools, but owning whatever is happening in that school. This would also build, this will sustain their participation. It will not stop. Maybe, for example, if a child or their child has completed foundational learning, it will not stop, because there will also be an encouragement to the rest of the community members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much. So from your response, Madam Director, you've talked about trust, you've talked empowerment of the community in as far as improving foundational learning is concerned. Thank you very much. So let me go to our colleagues in Nigeria, and now I'll ask Dr. Sani Njobdi. How can Professor Oladere, how did your research team negotiate the community system, PALE, and how did the research team bring the system on one hand and the community on the other hand together to negotiate?
Good afternoon once again. First of all, to just make some little correction that, like you said in the first time, Sani Njobdi is the name. Professor, common phrases that came up in most people interacting with communities, where you find that an official will say, oh, these people don't want to send their children to school. Those of us that have gone to remote communities, you find this phrase is very common. They don't like school. They don't like school. Okay. But one common thing we found as researchers is that communities and members of the communities all want their children educated. They want to send their children to learn one thing or the other. The difference would be maybe what you're teaching them may not be exactly what they would want to learn, but then all children will desire to learn and their parents will desire that more. And on the other hand, the government education system is there actually to ensure that children learn. That's why they are there. So with that, the goal is common for both community members and the education system. So recognizing that they have common goals, but on the other hand, there is this conflicting views, probably due to perspective. The education system, we recognize, we realize that it's a government system that is highly structured, highly conservative, highly formal, and guided by rules. On the other hand, the community system is highly adaptive, highly informal, and they are guided by their cultural and environmental realities. So with that, there lies the conflict. But since the goal is the same, we found that easy. So the things that we found that could that we are able to bring them together is that, okay, you have common goals. And our working with the community started maybe 15, 17, 20 years ago or even more. For me personally, maybe 17 or so. So we've been interacting with government system all this while. So the key thing, if you ask how, is by first building trust between your team and both government and community systems. And for the government, it entails bringing the government on board, being a researcher, bringing the government on board from the initial concept of the research. By the time you're conceiving the research, the government is already on board because they are the people that are to consume whatever you're going to produce as a research product. So the consumers will be there when you are cooking the food. The consumers will be there by the time you procure your vegetables and whatever condiments and put together in the pot to cook. So at that time, the consumer will have no issues whenever you invite the consumer to eat. And that's the analogy of what happens. So that made it easy to bring the community members who we've been working with all the time and the government system operators, okay, find out what are the issues. Some of your officials say these people don't want to send their children to school. But we interacted with them. They want their children to be in school. So let them tell you the issues. And they tell the issues. And what do you think we should do about it? They give the solutions. And government officials say, oh, if that's the case, let's consider what you have. Once it's compatible with the rules, and they allow that to happen, and then the solutions are implemented, and you find children getting back to school. So that's in a nutshell what I would want to say about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Another profound point from there, that communities are highly adaptive and they are eager to learn. And it's not that they don't want to send their children to school. They want to send their children to school, but sometimes is what is it that I would want our children to learn in school. So as we are moving on, I'm going to ask Dr. Rebecca. In Sudan, education and education accreditation has become politically loaded across conflict lines. So what does this mean for community initiatives and for children trying to continue studying and their long-term learning aspirations?
Thank you very much. So the community initiatives on education have been present across Sudan in RSF-controlled areas, as well as in areas controlled by the Sudanese armed forces. And in all these areas, communities have had to work with whatever authority is present. If they're in an area controlled by the RSF, they work with the RSF. If they are in an area controlled by the armed forces, they work with the armed forces. This isn't a testament to loyalty necessarily, but rather needing to get on with life and needing to ensure the well-being of their children. But as education has become politically polarized, it puts communities at risk. If an area comes under the control of the armed forces and there were community initiatives there when it was controlled by the RSF, the Army then asks, well, are these people supporting the RSF? Similarly, the opposite as well. And then in questions of accreditation, this becomes more severe. This year, the RSF launched its own national secondary school exams that are separate from those of the Sudanese Armed Forces government in Port Sudan. This means that in education, accreditation is becoming divided across the country, which will pose long-term challenges for children and families going forward and will endanger the futures of children and their ability to enroll in higher education or to seek jobs or recognition elsewhere.
Thank you very much for that response. So there is willingness for the parents to have their children in school, but you'd see context that our colleagues in the Sahel are operating in, not that conducive, but parents are trying their best to work together to support and sustain the learning within homes. So Madam Magombo, how do you prevent community participation from becoming an interference in professional teaching?
Community participation can really be assisted to ensure that they are not conflict with teaching by clearly defining the roles and the boundaries. That means at first we need to set boundaries that what is participation going to do and what are their roles so that they cannot interfere with the education system. For example, they can be guided on supporting roles and governance roles, just provides advisory to the school priorities, and also aligning participation with national education policies to ensure that there's formal agreement between the community participation and the education system. And also there's need to use structured systems. For example, if there are issues, they need to consult relevant committees like the school management committee, parent teacher association committee, so that their issues are responded to. And also we need to strengthen coordination mechanisms. How can we coordinate? Who are responsible for coordination? And then intensification on the monitoring and evaluation so that the communities really understand what is happening and feedback is brought to them. And also there's need to include inclusive participation in education so that they really understand that even the vulnerable groups are included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? We're still trying to minimize the back and forth of the mic, but anyways.
Hello? That's it? Can you hear me? Through the mic or you're hearing my voice? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much, Madam Magombo. I was able to hear you even though we had that technical challenge. Yeah, so from your response, you've talked about utilizing the existing structures that are already there, and indeed making sure that we are including all, we are not leaving any other group behind within the classroom and even beyond in the communities. Thank you so much for that. So going to Mr. Aliyu Musa from Nigeria. What are the key levers to promoting community engagement in education?
Thank you very much. The key remote education, especially in my state, which is Adamawa State, are very many. One, the community engagement through community mobilization to make sure that all discussion in relation to education are being engaged through the community. You mobilize them, engage the stakeholders through the LGES and also through the religious leaders. Let them make decisions on how education can move forward in their local communities. And also, if in touches been done so far, community can also take ownership of all their education system by making things actionable at their own end. So if there are things that they need the government to come in, they can forward them for government implementation and government as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. So community mobilization, community engagement, engagement of the leaders, and working together in coming up with the actions as a team, not influencing the actions. Mr. Mamadou, you describe community leadership as a bridge to government system and not a replacement. And hearing from your presentation, really, the community came in to sustain the education system. So what would it actually take locally for that handover to happen very well? And what's lost if it happens too soon or too late?
Thank you so much for this question. I think simply something to highlight. Of course, the sooner is the better, because I think you recall when I mentioned the out-of-school children, the figures, which is 10.6 million, very high figure. Of course, recognizing all governments' efforts, still communities also work to make sure things still goes. But the reality is the sustainability, how that is going to stay for a longer term, you know. That's how, in an immediate term, it's really important how government first, who are the duty bearers, can come and support this in a much structured and organized way to make it more structured in a sustainable way. But of course, as I mentioned, the low support from ODA, so donors, any contributor also are welcome to make sure these children who deserves access to quality educations remain there. And one thing also to add is how within all those support, what is going to education emergencies. You know, from our paper, we've also realized there are very few percentages which is really going to education measure, while the contexts are really high, you know, context which should prioritize education emergencies. So this is how I can do things.
In this support within this conflict region. So going to Malawi, Mr. Benister, what sustainable models is Malawi promoting in strengthening parental engagement in learners' education at home?
Well, thank you so much. And so I think the model is one, where we're saying we want to build this as an education system as a unit, where we don't have the community as belonging to the northern pole and the school itself belonging to the southern pole, but these together are forming a system where each one of them knows their role. And you know, what do I mean? We know we are coming historically from a background where many times fathers are considered as breadwinners. And so their sole intention when they wake up in the morning, particularly in the context of Malawi, where a great percentage of the population is living in poor conditions. This is a man who is waking up early in the morning. All he's thinking about is, where do I go to find money? So he's going either to he's going to the lake to fish. He forgets about the role to do with schooling his child. For as long as he's providing money to the household, he thinks the child is learning. We are coming from a background where parents often believe we do not have the capacity to influence what happens in the classroom. We are not learned. It is the teacher, it is only the teacher that can teach our child. So this is a background that we are coming from. And then we are saying to build this into a unified core, then we need to capacitate the communities so they know how they can influence their child's learning. Do we have parents who are busy with economic activities? Even so, you find that within that same community, there is a certain father who is committed to the education of their child and is also committed to fending for their family. How can we utilize this parent so he becomes instrumental in influencing other fathers so they can also develop the agency that is required? Do we have parents who are illiterate but have the motivation to influence their child's learning? At the same time, you find that there is someone who is ready to volunteer their time to help these parents to be able to contribute to the child's learning. How do we connect this volunteer to the school system so he knows what goes into the school system and he knows how to influence the learning at home? And at the end of the day, how can we bring all these people together so they can ask themselves questions? What do we desire from the system? How are we doing it? How are we failing? What do we do together to attain what we want to attain? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that contribution. So from your response, we need to move to a place where everyone knows their role. And for the parents, they need to be trained, or their capacity need to be strengthened in terms of what contribution or what role do they play in enhancing the learning outcomes of their learners. Now, lastly, for the Nigeria team, Mr. Njobdi, you talked about your approach for Nigeria, the approach that you use to enhance community engagement. How can that approach be scaled up to an entire state or province? And some of our colleagues here that want to learn, how can they scale such innovative approaches?
Thank you very much for this question. Going from what I had already explained, how that was achieved, it was achieved by first building trust between us researchers and the government officials that are responsible for implementing policy and implementation of education. In that partnership, we got to a stage where members of our team include government officials, and that's how we work together. This is the seed for sustainability and scale up when they are part of the cooking, as I said earlier. So that's one thing. But key important things to emphasize is that government must realize that communities are not as docile, and this has been repeated in most of the presentations, in all of the presentations. Communities are not as docile as if they don't have any solutions. They have their own initiatives, they have their own solutions, and they respond to the environment probably more rapidly than the government. The government requires a lot of procedural bureaucracies to respond. Communities do that immediately. So government must realize that on its part and be ready to open up to work with these communities. These are the key to scaling up, and that flexibility on the part of government, it's part of the key. But you can't just have a straight-jacketed approach and apply it throughout the country or even throughout the state. Sometimes you have to go local for certain peculiarities of these communities. So if once government realizes that, so empowerment should not stop at the national level or even at the state level, rather it should go down to the local level. So the seeds of those that are supposed to facilitate this engagement for scaling up should be sought at the local level as low as possible. So these are the critical components we think that is important for scale up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So include the government, and you need to remember that communities are not docile. They are not a blank slate. They know what is supposed to happen. So lastly, to our colleagues in Sahel and Sudan, Mamadou and Rebecca. So your studies show communities already leading and financing education, often more reliably than formal structures. So what makes some community-led systems durable and others fragile and others unequal?
Thank you for this question. And in the context of Sudan, the communities have mobilized across the country in order to create initiatives to educate their children. However, they don't have equal access to resources, equal access to experience and capacity for organizing, or equal access to, or have equal priorities for education. Regions that have historically been marginalized with regards to access to education often have families who tend to prioritize other essential life-saving aspects over education and thus deprioritize education initiatives. Simultaneously, and also no less what goes into these initiatives and what sort of contributions they can give. In areas with a longer history of education infrastructure, adults in the community often are well aware of what sort of organizing is necessary, what sort of resources are necessary, and what sort of volunteering will make a big difference for a school or an initiative. This means that areas with historic access to education tend to have more vigorous initiatives than those in areas that have historically been deprived. And this is something that should be kept in mind when it comes to supporting initiatives and thinking about what's necessary, not just materially in terms of how to support the initiatives materially, but also in terms of logistically. With that, let me give you to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thanks for these questions. Yeah, clearly to reiterate that communities prioritize education for their kids. Of course, we know despite the challenges, the complexities, all those other issues that may come, talking about poverty and everything, but it depends how also you want something to happen. So that prioritization from community is one key aspect that is, still allowing that continuity, one. Secondly, also, of course, we mentioned that there is kind of very high support in terms of financing education from domestic side and even ODS, which also still show, despite the condition, people are still standing, for the continuity of access to quality education for the kids. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. So we can see that there is an interplay of intrinsic motivation and desire among parents to have their children learn. And this now translates into how they contribute financially to supporting education. So now, we welcome questions and of course quick reactions from the audience as we reflect what has been discussed in our discussion today. So we need to consider what existing community leadership in your own context could be better recognized and connected to education improvement. So I welcome comments, questions. If you have, please, you can raise your hand.
Thank you very much. I am Professor Harun Musa, Chairman, Jigawa State Universal Basic Education Board in Nigeria. For me, community ownership is very important, and I always have special concern that as far as education is concerned, is beyond the government alone. The community must be carried along. And I realize that when you are talking about the community, specifically the parents are the immediate people who you need to engage in terms of engagement. And even the parent, because women were busy trying to earn a living for the community, for the family, I mean, we don't have much time for the children. But mothers, they are always together with the children. When they are leaving for school, they are the last people they will see. When they come back, they are the first people they will see. So I personally feel whenever you are engaging the community, the mother is so important that you don't forget about her. I have tried in my state. We have engaged the mothers. We are able to see a lot of improvement in terms of what? Learning outcome of our learners. Because the parents were able to track learning progress, especially the mother. They'll be able to know that a child that has gone to school today, this morning, comes back in the afternoon, and nothing happens. Something went wrong. We're not supposed to blame the learner. Most likely the teacher is in school, but could not sit down and do what he's supposed to do. And because of that tracking we're doing, we're able to know those teachers that are not in school. We're able to know those teachers that are in school, but they are not in the classroom. So for me, I look at mothers as a low-hanging fruit as far as engagement is concerned. Not only that, the house-to-house campaign for out of school, we're able to use mothers to assist us in trying to bring back those learners that are not in school within the community. And at the same time, we're able to train them on how they can be able to be responsible for the education of their children. What I mean specifically, we taught them how they can be able to assure that their children are safe on their way to school and even when they're in school. Because they should be able to recognize and they should respond immediately, because early intervention of mother can completely eliminate whatever abuse that is going to come on board on the child. And not only that, they should be able to report. They should be able to refer. They should be able to record in case there will be litigation on the issue. So for me, basically based on three things I have mentioned, we are seeing engagement of mother as a low-hanging fruit, which can really assist our learners to have better learning outcomes. So what do you think, as people who are really experienced, you are vast, I can see. All of you are fully loaded with a lot of experience. What do you think engaging the mother as an opportunity which we have not harnessed for a very long time, which we need to do? And if there is anything you can do else, especially when it comes to the mother, because they are so close. We are able to train the mother so that they can be able to prepare the child early enough. We have been losing learning time because some of the mothers, they don't know how to start preparing the child. Sometimes it is in the morning they will ask the child, go and fetch water for me, go and buy charcoal for me, go and buy sugar for me before I can prepare something for you. Before the end of the day, before the child can leave home to the school, it will be around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And that protection of learning time is very, very important. Because what a teacher can do when the learner is not there, and he has already started the lesson, and the learner is arriving maybe 2 hours after. So I look at mothers as something that I call low-hanging fruit, which I think if you dare bring them on board, you can be able to achieve a lot. But what do you think? for me, I have satisfying results. Please tell me where I can improve in terms of this engagement with mothers so that I can be able to have better results. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting presentations, and thanks a lot, Salam Awit, for your group as well. I think we can, I think Mr. Benista, what you said about the link between the school and the community resonates with me. And from intersectoral learning in health, there has been that link which was missing for a long time. But in education, we haven't seen it. Where the school is there, the household is there. There is a distance between the two, and they are not connected. Well, literature review, exempted. My observation has shown that sometimes the teacher teaches something, but in the house, it is unlearned, untaught. They just reverse what the teacher has said. That creates a problem for the child. So, Mr. Benista, I would like to know, what is that thing that should link the school to the community? In public health, we have what we call community resource person, vaccine distribution, commodity distribution. There is a community member that leads the health facility with the community. In education, who should do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, 2 questions there. For the first, okay, so we get the third one. Okay, so let's get the responses from our panelists. You have heard the questions. The first one, low-hanging fruit, engagement of mothers. So I would want to hear responses from the 3 presenters or 3 country representatives to tell us what is happening or what's your experience in engaging mothers in your context. So we'll start with Nigeria. From Nigeria, we are going to pass the mic to Deputy Director, Madam Saokira, and then we are going to you're going to pass the mic to Mamadou on the same question, engaging the mothers.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for bringing this up, Prof. It's a very pertinent thing, and it quickly reminded me of our experience in the field, where we had this thing that I mentioned, that bell ringing, that they don't like school, and said, okay, those people who said that they don't like to send their children to school, those who said so are actually having their children in school. And they said the others who don't have their children in school don't like to send their children to school. So he said, okay, Prof has also mentioned about community leadership. And that's a very broad word anyway. Very broad. Community is broad itself, and leadership is another broad term, where you say, okay, I want the community leader, then the head of the community becomes the community leader. But then communities, you have communities within communities. You have segments within the communities, and those segments have their own leaders. So we went deeper, we went beyond the surface to see, okay, those who don't have their children in school, who are they? And who do we speak to among them? They are also leaders of their own sub-communities. So we spoke to them. And while speaking to them, we remember that when in a particular case that I give as an example is, the father said, no, I have all my children in school. Because we had focus group discussions with males separate from females. Then in that focus group discussion, father said, we had all our children in school. But we particularly selected those groups from our informants, that these are people who they are termed as they don't like school. But they said they have their children in school. Then another group, some female team members interacting with female, that person who said that he has his children in school, his wife happened to be in the female group. And then The wife said, no, my child is not in school. See him over there. So the father said he's in school, and the mother said the child is not in school. So the mother knew that the child is not, and is concerned about that actually. In fact, the initiatives that later came up, the first group to come up with an initiative to contribute money, because one of the issues has been poverty. Poverty, like real poverty, where even if it costs $10 to enroll a child cannot be enrolled, or maybe even less than $10. If it is even $1, somebody cannot raise that in some cases. But those same women came together to put some contributive funding, to pool resources to send those children who could not be sent by their parents to school. So women spearheaded that. The first group we had coming together to contribute money to do that were women. In fact, in that same meeting, those women agreed that, okay, since we contribute money to celebrate naming ceremonies, to celebrate weddings, why don't we also use that to send our children to school? So they contributed money to send children to school. And that emphasizes that idea of women being the ones with the children all the time. They know more about them, and they can facilitate a lot of that. So I think we as a team, we'll be looking into that angle, and I believe others will also take this as a very important point to look deeper into. Or we have seen insights in the field. Thank you very much.
You want to add?
Oh, thank you, my chairman from Jigawa State. Mothers cannot be ruled out in terms of education of a child. So my own is also a plea to our donors and our partners. So if there are programs to be implemented within a state or a country, it's good for us to consider engaging mothers to be highly placed for contribution of child education. Because as what Dr. Sani said, we could remember in a particular local government whereby women contribute money to support their children to school. Because in this particular local government where research has been taking place, we observe that most of the children are going to farms. So if you visit school, you find that children have already gone to farm during October, September. That's what we call roro, whereby they used to pluck granules. At the end of the exercise, they will give them something and go home with it. So if we have more partners that can at least engage with the government to support the women, so that at least the children will be in school during that rural time, I think we can go further to improve education quality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. For Malawi, I think if you can recall from our presentation, we mentioned that the mother group is one of the structures in almost all primary schools. So we have a mother group which works with the schools. These are members who are coming from surrounding communities or villages around each and every primary school. So they select members like the chair, the treasurer, and maybe the secretary for that particular group. And these groups have indeed worked with the school they belong to, especially for the girls. And of late, we are they have added even, or they have taken boys on board because the boys were feeling left out. So initially, as they have been working with girls, they have been assisting girls in a number of areas. One of the main areas where the assistance has gone to among girls is on menstrual health, and even the talks on puberty and whatsoever, and also bringing back girls who have dropped out of school to go back to school, and also making efforts on their own, maybe contributing things like pens, uniforms to these girls. And even those who dropped out and maybe went to early marriages, they have also made so many initiatives to bring these girls back to school. So we have seen mothers indeed working very hard to assist the learning of their learners in different communities. But maybe where we might have a gap with a specific role of these mothers to foundational learning, because from whatever I've pointed out, you can see that we are talking of puberty, the girls who have maybe gone past the foundational learning classes. So from our friends in Jigawa, maybe would want to learn more on how you are working with these mothers, especially for the foundational learning classes, so that maybe we can adopt some of those strategies and add as a role to this mother group, which is already in existence in almost all schools in Malawi, especially the primary schools. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think I will try to be brief. Of course, building on all those discussions, I will try to look at it on a technical lens. Of course, we are talking about foundational learning. We are talking about quality education, but some key enablers to that is the time learning, the time children spend in classrooms learning. We all acknowledge that as for teacher, I think the chairman mentioned that while the teacher is here in the classroom teaching and the learner is absent, how or what are he or she going to understand or learn? So that's how I personally witness the role of moms in villages, in communities, how they do the best they can do to wake up early, to make help the child get ready for the school. Sometimes kids refuse to go. All the good words, maybe I'm giving you these candies, please go, when you come back we'll do that. All those are means, are solutions to encourage children to go to school. So for me, as I say, I'm leveraging on technical aspects, is all those key for some small elements that contribute to the retention of the child at school and the time the learners are spending in classrooms, and also the time they will be learning in classroom contributes significantly to the quality learning outcome. So just speaking on that technical perspective and also witnessing that everyone is important, particularly mothers. We know they are, here everywhere, looking at community perspective, going to the farm, preparing food, helping kids to be ready. All those are really tasks that money cannot really get, It's just engagement. It's just how you prioritize your learner's education. And lastly, there was a panelist also who mentioned how women fund the, children's education. Sometimes they go to do very hard work, but still ready to put money in the kids' education. This is really something highly commendable, of course, to ensure the chairman that, yes, we're on the same page on this. And also that brings on looking at more on gender responsive, learning aspect, how to make learning environment more gender sensitive, how all of us play a role, even all those, SPMCs, etc., how those, school, organs can contribute more, can be gender, sensitive, having male, female, because we speak generally from our perspective and what we know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. You want to add something? Or is that a different question?
Not sure if this. I just wanted to very quickly say that Lively Minds is an organisation working in Ghana and Gambia, Ethiopia, expressly activates mothers as the sleeping giants of quality early childhood education. So we bring paced learning to the mothers, delivered through government systems, created with the government. Primary school teachers, community health workers deliver it. Its sole purpose is to activate mothers. So if anybody would like to learn more about this, because I've been listening to you all dying to say, but we're doing it. And our RCT has proven that mothers can activate learning gains of an extra year, meaning they are ready to hit primary school for the foundational program learning that comes on. So if anybody would like to find more, my name is Eleanor Sykes. Please do find Lively Minds, because we're doing what you would like. Thank you.
Let me just add quickly that I think the experience in Ghana has been that many schools were started by communities. Many schools, I don't know about other countries, but our experience is that many schools were started by communities. Along the line, government basically disempowered communities and started making it technical and beginning to make community parents feel they don't have a role in their children's education. And I think that is the number one thing we need to reverse. We need to empower communities and parents that education of their children is their responsibility and they have a role to play. That for me is number one. And let's drop this technical, this thing about education and making it, it's a bit like health, where doctors have taken over our health and made it look like we ourselves don't even know what's happening in our bodies. You know, we should be facilitators of education owned by communities. The other thing I want to say is the relevance of education. I mean, I asked one professor who is also a community leader, a chief, and I said, Nana Nketia, you are from a fishing community. If we succeed in taking all the children into the classroom, where would the next generation of fishermen come from? Because in that community, even numeracy is not related to fishing. We'll say how many apples or how many, we won't talk of how many fishes. So the children finish and they feel themselves, they can't fit into that community. Somebody told me many years ago that education is about passing knowledge, skills, and values from one generation to another. What values, what knowledge, what skills are we promoting? What our children come through education and come with nothing. They don't fit. That's why they are crossing the Sahara to go and look for work elsewhere. We need to begin to look at the relevance. We can blend both our livelihoods, they link it with education. Most of what, when that farmer who is taking the child to the farm knows why he or she is doing that, because that child has to take over from him or her. But the education system is not willing to blend. It's not willing to meet that. So children finish, they can't fit, they can't farm, they run, they come to the cities. So I'm asking some fundamental structural issues for us to think about. Lastly, and I'll just illustrate with this. I worked on a project, community-led elimination of child labor in cocoa. Before we joined that campaign, the whole conversation was, oh, let's rescue these children from the farms and take them. We said, take them to where? These are children of cocoa farmers. So for 2 years, we had dialogue with the communities, all levels, including the children themselves, for people to realize the vulnerability of children and what children can learn, what children can do, and the importance of education, and even the importance of the education they are giving their children. Lastly, I just want to illustrate the importance of mothers. My mother was non-literate, doesn't mean she was not educated. She was educated in her own way. But she saw the value of formal education. And one of my brothers, and I'm the first of 11 children, one of my brothers was telling me this story, which I didn't know. He said when he was about to go to PCs, our mother asked him, so my friend, my son, how is it? He said the same. He was always last. So my mother went to the school, moved him to reseat P5. They said there was no place in P5. Moved him to P4. They said there was no place in P4. Moved him to P3. And then the brother was sitting there and said, when they said there was no place, they said they are lying. Because all we are doing is sending the children through. And this brother of mine now is a millionaire. By the time he finished GHS, he decided he wasn't going to continue with school. He did well in this, and he's become a businessman. He owns one of the pharmaceutical companies, the big pharmaceutical companies in West Africa, supplying about 15 countries. So I think while he was going to that school, he was also trading. So he learned trading. That wasn't taught him in school. So he became a trader, and today he's a millionaire. My father, who is a step to him, died recently and gave me 50,000 Ghana cedis. That's almost $10,000 to help bury my dad. So please, let's rethink education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I know it's getting exciting. That is directed to Benister. That has not yet been responded to. Yeah, so maybe we allow him. We have tackled on the mothers, I think the first question. So let's ask him to respond to the question.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. I think in the first place, thank you, because I think we tend to agree to say there are a lot of disjunctures between the community and the school. And I think one of the clear disjunctures that you've clearly highlighted is where the school has expectations and the community has expectations that are different altogether from what the school expects. And so the child goes to school, learns X, and as it goes to the home, the parent now unlearns that from the child and imparts Y into the child. That's I think the most unfortunate disjuncture that is there in our communities. Now, I work with Creative Center for Community Mobilization, and I think my workplace believes in an element of conscientization of the mind as one of the powerful tools to breaking the barriers to development. We believe, and this I think is the case that we were presenting in our story, to say I think our communities, there are a lot of strengths in our communities. And so there are a lot of structures that are there that are critical in moving the community forward. Because even in the absence, I think as someone said, that even education started with the community itself. So community organizing is real. And if we take advantage of the same, then we'll be able to identify critical pillars upon which we can build the strength of the community towards enhancing the education of their learners. What do I mean? We have so many communities where when the chief speaks, no one does the opposite. How do we conscientize this chief to even think about the benefits of education in his local so he can be able to utilize that power to be able to move mountains where we've had a lot of barriers before? We have communities, for example, here in Malawi, where we have initiation ceremonies. And in such communities, when a child misbehaves, once that child is told, I'm going to bring back the Ngaliba, we call him the Ngaliba, the initiation counselor, I'm going to bring him back to you. He knows what the Ngaliba will do to him. And so this child, if he was misbehaving, he will stop right away because he's fearing the Ngaliba. How do we conscientize this Ngaliba to go beyond helping this learner initiated into adulthood to even getting initiated into the awareness that we want, so that at the end of the day it becomes learned and effective contributor to the community development. So there are a lot of players in the community that we can utilize. But what matters, one, is how do we conscientize their minds so they become aware of what is required in order to develop meaningfully their communities. Two, maybe I'll go by the principle of the biblical stories. The two shall not go together unless they agree. If the planning of the education is done on a separate table and the people are treated as beneficiaries who are on the receiving end, then believe you me, we will not move any mountains. Unless these two understand why they're doing what they're doing, they come to the same table, they plan together, they set ambitions together, because that's another dangerous thing that keeps people away. We set too much ambitions, that at the end of the day we forget these are just community volunteers who have got also other responsibilities to fend for their homes. They're coming here working to promote education, but they have mouths to feed at home. So how do we bring all these people together to agree on what matters to them, to agree on why we need education, and to agree how we can attain the same at the end of the day, what is addressing critical issues at home. So even the players that are critical in the community, if they know why we are doing what we are doing, if we plan together with them, they become instrumental. So almost everyone in the community, almost all those key pillars in the community who have been doing other things can also become pillars even in the education realm. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. Let's have one question from.
Merci, je me présente, je m'appelle Soumaré Oumar, je suis directeur général de l'enseignement au niveau de la Mauritanie. D'abord, je félicite les panélistes, c'est vraiment une thématique très importante et qui généralement, je pense même que ce panel est mal placé par rapport à l'agenda même de cette rencontre. Parce que les après-midi, ce n'est pas le bon moment de placer des panels qui intéressent aussi tout le monde ça. Maintenant, je pense que là, la question qui se pose, c'est de repenser même l'éducation en Afrique. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans une situation où l'éducation est sortie de la communauté. On ne peut pas sortir quelque chose de la communauté et demander à la communauté de prendre le leadership. La première opération d'abord, c'est qu'on puisse aujourd'hui enseigner nos enfants dans nos langues nationales et comme ça la communauté se retrouve dans cette éducation. Et malheureusement, ce n'est pas ce qui se passe. Même si la communauté a toute la volonté d'accompagner, elle est limitée. Donc il y a un effort à faire, repenser tout ça. Le deuxième aspect, c'est par rapport, on a parlé du rôle de la femme. C'est bien, mais il faudrait aussi outiller les femmes à pouvoir jouer ce rôle, qu'on leur donne un leadership qui leur permette de pouvoir intervenir, de pouvoir les aider surtout parce que le plus souvent, elles sont les plus touchées par la pauvreté. Parce que la pauvreté africaine, elle est très importante, mais elle est féminine. Si on doit travailler d'éducation dans la pauvreté, il faudrait voir quel rôle peut-on donner aux femmes pour qu'elles puissent pallier à ça. Donc accompagner les femmes à mettre des structures en place, des communautés d'épargne et de crédit, parce que toutes les femmes produisent, elles ont des entrées. Mais le problème c'est quoi? C'est l'épargne. Les entrées qui sont là sont pour la consommation la plus rapide. Donc une éducation financière est importante pour permettre à ces femmes de jouer un rôle très important. Le troisième aspect dont je veux évoquer, c'est par rapport même au calendrier scolaire. Aujourd'hui, nous avons des calendriers scolaires qui ne peuvent pas marcher dans nos localités parce qu'il y a des activités économiques qui sont là, qui doivent se dérouler. Est-ce qu'il faut révolutionner ces calendriers scolaires et voir quand est-ce qu'il faut ouvrir l'école, quand est-ce qu'il faut ouvrir les vacances, donner les vacances du premier trimestre, les vacances du deuxième trimestre, etc. Et ça, il faut qu'on accepte de repenser l'éducation. On ne peut pas prendre un calendrier qui colle avec un autre monde et on l'applique chez nous. Aujourd'hui, le calendrier scolaire que nous appliquons tous n'est pas adapté à notre climat ni encore à notre contexte économique. Le dernier aspect sur lequel je voudrais intervenir, c'est l'organisation, les auxiliaires de l'éducation, les parents d'élèves, les comités de gestion. Au moins, dans ces structures, nous pouvons agir pour donner un pourcentage dans la composition de l'association des parents d'élèves, qu'on puisse donner des rôles clés qui ne peuvent être occupés que par des femmes. Dans les comités de gestion, qu'on ait des rôles clés qui ne peuvent être gérés que par les femmes. Parce que très souvent, la communauté fait rentrer quelque chose dans l'association des parents d'élèves, mais et ce n'est pas bien utilisé, encore moins utilisé en direction des élèves. Donc il y a des efforts à faire. S'il vous plaît, repensez l'éducation dans notre continent et essayons de voir des actes très forts pour adapter le contexte de l'éducation au milieu dans lequel nous évoluons. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Ça fait plaisir d'entendre ces contributions immenses des membres du ministère de l'Éducation et d'un pays qui nous avons mentionné aussi aujourd'hui. Donc, merci pour toutes ces réflexions. Je pense que vous avez un peu, you understood a little bit what he was trying to explain with the mic, right? But I think I'm trying to summarize it to 3 to 4 points. The first point is really encouraging how to rethink about, our education systems, because most of the time we are talking about communities, but we need to look at like kind of education has been taken away from communities. And one of the major things is what the medium of instructions. Mother tongue, using mother tongue as teaching medium is something which when it's done, community feel more familiar and they can easily get appropriate with it also. So secondly is how we are talking about women's roles in terms of how they support the children's education. So how we equip those women also with skills, particularly financial skills, because we know that stands for the children's education, and how they can also get capacitated. Number 3 is from experiences as is shared, our school calendars is not, are not much more aligned with our realities. Looking at our contexts, farming, seasons and everything. So there is really also a need to think through this. And globally, the contribution is there is really need to rethink our, like across the continent, our education systems. J'essaie un peu de traduire un peu pour que les gens puissent comprendre. And then I was really responding in French that is really important to hear this from government stakeholders, because we know we've been mentioning Mauritania here as one of the countries we feature out in one of our recent paper. And we, of course, acknowledge his contributions. But from my point of view, I will think this is also a whole, all of us, role and responsibility. It might even go beyond this panel. And something you mentioned earlier was this panel might, would have been even be better to be there when we have many people around to, to contribute much more than, because in the evening time, much more people have left the hall. J'ai essayé de résumer, j'espère que j'ai été fidèle, mais si jamais je n'ai pas été très fidèle, merci de me compléter. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, merci beaucoup, and thank you very much, Mamadou and the participants. So thank you very much. We have really listened to so much from the 3 presenters. Just summing up what our panelists have said, one thing that we need to take out is that we need to deconstruct how we think community engagement should look like. So beyond providing resources, beyond mother groups supporting adolescent girls' education, we need to facilitate the engagement of mothers and parents in enhancing the learning outcomes, particularly for foundation learning classrooms. So thank you very much, our panelists, and I believe as we are going back, we need to remember that when community voice is connected to evidence, accountability, and instructional improvement, community engagement moves from just participation to system transformation. This is something that the last contributor talked about, that we need to be looking beyond maybe pilots or just projects in pockets, but we need to be looking at the system as a whole. So thank you so much to our speakers and our panelists. I believe we can clap hands for them. And of course, clap hands for yourselves for hanging in there. It's 6 o'clock, but you've been there. It's been a long day from 7 o'clock to this point in time. Really, you have sacrificed quite a lot. So thank you so much. As we are winding up, there will be an evaluation form. Please, you can go and resume your seats. Thank you so much. We can take the photos. Sorry, I'm being reminded that we need to take a group photo for the presenter. So maybe you can just stand there. May I ask the photographer to please come and take the picture? So, okay. Yeah, so additional announcement is that we have a cocktail this evening where we had lunch. So you're invited to the cocktail. And we have an evaluation form. So after everything, please let's scan and provide feedback.